All right. Happy Halloween, everybody. I knew everyone was going to tease me for starting class on time tonight. But you see, because it's Halloween, a bunch of normal activities that usually happen on Wednesday night didn't happen tonight. So I've actually had an unusually quiet evening. Anyway, welcome. Oh, Karina's mad at me because I'm not in costume. Yeah. It's the spookiest thing I've seen all day, says Steven. I know, right? So yeah, sorry, Karina. I'm sorry I'm not in costume. I don't usually do much dressing up for Halloween. But yeah, sorry. It's a bad form. It's bad form, I know. Okay, so tonight is session 16 of our trip through Morte d'Arthur. Before I start, quick, I have a few notes about tonight's class. I don't know if I want to call it an apology for tonight's reading exactly, but something close to that. But before that, a couple quick announcements. First, and most urgently, we've been having a sale. We've been running a special in celebration of Chaucer's Death Day, you may recall, on my Chaucer 2, my Canterbury Tales class. So $75 for anytime audit access to the Canterbury Tales class. That special ends tonight. It's like mere hours away. So now is the very, very last moment at which you can take advantage of that sale on the Canterbury Tales class. We've had a bunch of orders today, which has been really fun. So anyway, that's so I just wanted to make sure to remind you of that. If you were thinking about ordering the Canterbury Tales class and haven't gotten around to it, now would be the good time to do that here in the background while we're doing class. So keep that in mind. Secondly, we have our next moot is coming up. Having just been in LA last weekend, which was great fun, and really quite special fun. The remarkable combination of regional moot plus World Series. I mean, man, that was unreal. So anyway, LA Moot was great fun, and we're doing Magnolia Moot in a week and a half next weekend, Saturday, November 10th. We'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I hope that all of you who are in the area down there, who are in the greater Charlotte region, can drive to Charlotte, or will be able to come and join me. It's going to be a fun little moot down there in Charlotte. So I'm looking forward to meeting people down there. So don't forget, registration is going to stay open here for a little bit. So that'll be you still have some chances here, but of course it's coming up. So don't forget to register for that. Okay, so those are my quick announcements for today. I'm trying not to get too far behind in the Sir Tristram section, because it would be easy to get bogged down, and I don't want to be. In particular, since the sort of introductory comments I wanted to make about Malory's treatment of the Tristram and Isolde story is, to some extent, so the story of Sir Tristram and Isolde is sort of the secondary romance in many different senses of that word, right? On the one hand, it's the secondary romance in that, it's like the also ran, right? You've got Lancelot and Guinevere as the great romance, and you've got Tristan and Isolde as like the other great romance, but it's clearly secondary, right? Just as Tristram is the number 2 knight in the world, but he's clearly number 2. He's under Lancelot, and we can see, of course, in the very end of today's assigned reading, you can see how Isolde is under Guinevere, right? She writes to Guinevere for advice, showing who is the number 1 lady in the world, right? So they're secondary in that sense. They're, you know, they're secondary in the like also ran sense, right? Of being not quite the greatest romance between the greatest knight and the greatest lady in the world. But they're also secondary, I think, in a different and a more important sense. And that is they're kind of, well, I don't want to call them the warm-up band for the tragedy of Lancelot and Guinevere, but they're almost like that. One of the things that you may have noticed, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and reactions to the Tristram and Isolde story, because by the end of today's class, by the end of today's reading, we've gotten through the vast majority of the Tristram and Isolde material. Like most of the events that he's gonna bring, Sir Tristram and Isolde are still going to be characters whom Malory is going to maintain for a while. When I say the Tristram and Isolde material, I mean the stuff that he's bringing in from the sources, right? So when you read, the romance of Tristram and Isolde, in one of the old, in one of those French books that Malory is referring to, he's covered most of the material from those romances. So it's not exactly done. We haven't brought it to any kind of ending point, but he's kind of crammed it all in there. And crammed is really the word, right? It's I said I'd be interested to hear from you. What I would mostly be interested to hear from you is, did you have a hard time following this? This is one of those things. I was actually at LA Moot this past weekend. I was making this analogy in a completely different context. We were talking about adaptation, which was the theme of the conference, and one of the things I was talking about was in my keynote was basically sort of like what makes a good adaptation and kind of some thoughts about that specifically applied to Tolkien. But in the context of that, one of the things that I was saying is you've got to make sure that it is possible. Of course, it's in fact quite easy to have an adaptation which keeps faithfulness to the original as a really high priority, and places a secondary priority on like the integrity of its own story, right? And so one example that I was pointing to illustrate this was the film version of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which I found bewildering to watch. And I found myself desperately clinging to my memories of the book in order to put together. I mean, they tried to just do everything, right? Briefly, in that film, you just kind of cram the whole like 800-page book into a like 2.5-hour film. And while I was watching it, I found myself wondering, would somebody who is watching this movie without ever having read the book, would they even be able to follow it? I mean, there were so many things that seemed like only, thumbnails, right? Like just little allusions, which you'll follow. If you remember the book, you'll be able to keep track of what's going on. But it was hard. I mean, several of the Harry Potter films are kind of like that, and by like that I mean focused more on doing a sort of a summary of the entire book rather than really thinking about the integrity of their story independently, the story of the film. Anyhow, so my sense is I get a similar kind of reaction, not for the same reason, but a similar kind of reaction to Malory's treatment of the Tristram and Isolde story. Because like so many of the elements are in there, but they're just kind of chucked together and often treated really, really briefly, right? Very, very briefly, such that sometimes you lose any point to them whatsoever. So like, for instance, do you remember that little incident where Tristram is like holed up in a chapel and then he gets back to the court and he's like, where's Isolde? And they're like, oh, she's off at the leper colony, right? She's at the Lazar Coat. And he's like, hey, that's not appropriate. And they're like, yeah, it's really kind of not. And he goes and rescues her. And it's like the whole thing, like her being at the leper colony. Like, how did she get there? Why is she there? What the heck is going on? And it takes like, Malory spends like 3 sentences on it at most, right? We get like the one really brief reference to like the Lazar Code, to the leper colony, and it's like, what is going on there? And I mean, like the Order of the Phoenix, right? I was able to hold it together while watching the film because I did remember the book pretty well. So I'm like, okay, all right, I'm tracking. And I felt myself doing the same thing when I've been rereading this past week, this section of Malory. I felt myself doing the same thing with the Tristram and Isolde story, right? I'm like remembering the other versions of, the couple French, there are two major French versions and the German version I mentioned, which are sort of the two most prominent versions of Tristram and Isolde by Thomas and Beroul, by the way. Beroul and Thomas. Those are the two French authors who wrote the main Tristan and Isolde French stories that Malory's working with here. So, I mean, I remember the business about the leper colony, but it got a great deal more of attention, right? So it's just, it's almost like he's kind of checking off points, right? Like, oh yeah, this happened and this happened and this happened. Okay, check. We've done the whole Tristan and Isolde story. So I remember last time I read Malory, having the feeling that he was being a little bit half-hearted in telling the Tristan and Isolde story, and I was sort of not quite sure why. He seems to be kind of. I mean, one could make the argument that sort of the Tristram and Isolde story is kind of falling, in between two stools here, right? It's like he is neither really doing justice to the Tristram and Isolde story, nor is he just skipping it, right? So instead he's like, okay, middle ground, right? Let's rip through the whole thing, but like not really try to do any kind of narrative justice to it, really at all, right? So anyhow, so first I wanted to kind of apologize for that, but it's not just that. One of the things that was really kind of fun, actually, in reading it this time is that it began to make a little bit more sense to me. I began to see, for really the first time in my reading, whenever I've done more sort of detailed work, like articles that I've written and stuff like that, it's been on the later stuff, the sort of high profile stuff. I've never really worked closely with the Tristram and Isolde material before, mostly because, again, most people don't read it much. Most people skip it when they teach it in class, and very few people, because Tolkien doesn't make much of a contribution, to, like, the story, the legend of Tristram and Isolde. There is, like, 0 people ever who have been like, Malory's version of Tristram and Isolde is the greatest, most beautiful Tristram and Isolde story out there. Like, nobody ever thought that or said that. So again, a lot of people just kind of skip it, but including, well, I'd never totally skipped it, but as I said, I haven't thought about it quite as much. But this time I've been seeing some patterns here which begin to help me make sense of it in ways that I hope is going to be useful. So here's what we're going to do. As I was looking at all these random elements, my first thought was, again, as my thought has generally been when I've come to this, like, why are we getting this sort of bewildering set of, like, this happened and, oh, this other thing happened, and with almost no attempt at any kind of narrative continuity. You'll notice that, like, Mark is trying to kill Tristram, and then everything's fine again, right? And, like, he escapes with Isolde, and they live in the woods for a while, and then Mark comes after them, and then they kind of just go home again after a while, and then they're back in the court again, and then they're being discovered again, right? And now she's being put on trial for, like, the 3rd time, and he rescues her, and, but then they go back to the court again, and everything's fine again, right? That kind of thing keeps happening. So why give us all of these details? Why continue to have us kind of herring around after these snippets, really snippets, essentially, these little brief moments in the story, rather than just either letting us, because we know Malory can tell a story, right, and make it fit together, and really make it work. He just doesn't seem to want to here. So what does he want to do? And that's the thing that I have my new theory on. So my new theory is he wants us to see each one of these, to pay attention to each one of these individual elements, because they're all going to be important later. The title of the class tonight is A Blueprint for Tragedy, because that is, I think, what he is doing with the story of Tristram and Isolde. It is secondary to the story of Lancelot and Guinevere, not just in the sense that it's in second place or that it's second best and therefore treated more half-heartedly by him, but it's secondary in the sense that it derives its significance from how it informs us or prepares us for the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. When you look at each one of those elements, each one of those which taken on their own in the Tristram and Isolde story seems kind of random, and again it's hard to see how it fits into a continuous narrative, but each one of those elements is gonna be important later, right? It brings up something, it compels us to think about something which we will want to remember when we come back to it. Almost everything, not the leper colony thing so much, but almost everything else in the story of Tristram and Isolde is gonna be relevant. We will see the parallel later on. There's going to be a quite direct parallel, and that's as soon as I started noticing that, I'm like, oh, this is just like that later scene. Oh, and this is just like, aha, right. This is the pattern that we're seeing. They're as I say, almost like the warm-up act, but that makes it sound sillier than it is. What we're seeing is, as I say, a blueprint for tragedy, right? The tragedy of Tristram and Isolde is a lowercase t tragedy, right? This is not going to be a tragedy of epic proportions. It's not going to tear down the Arthurian court. You know, the whole world that we've been building and living in during the course of this book so far is not going to be lying in ruins as a consequence of the tragedy of this romance, right? And yet, in this romance, this smaller scale romance, this secondarily important romance, we are going to see all of the elements which are going to contribute later on, so that we're going to be primed for those, right? And we're going to be ready when we see them later on. So that's the thing that I want to really emphasize when we're looking through this. So to some extent, I'm not going to really try to make sense of the overall narrative of Tristan and Isolde, because there's not that much of an overall narrative to make sense of. What I'm going to do is try to identify the pieces that you're going to want to notice, right? Because they'll be important later, not for themselves, but because they're going to be parallel later on. It's all a kind of foreshadowing of what we're going to see. Some of it is direct setup of character development that will be happening later on, but a lot of it is really just anticipation of, the exploration of the raw materials that are going to be formed into a much more coherent story of the tragedy of Lancelot and Guinevere. So, all right. That's what we're going to be looking at here tonight. So let's, we're just about to get Tristram out of Ireland the first time, right? So he was over there cunningly disguising himself as Tramtrist, and La Belle Isolde was falling in love with him, right? Okay, so she was in love with him, and he seemed to be into her, though I don't know if it's just me, but it kind of seemed like she was more into him than he was into her. But I don't, maybe that's unfair. But anyway, we had the rivalry with Sir Palomides, which we had introduced, right? So Sir Palomides, the Saracen knight, remember, he is a Muslim knight who is there in Christendom for reasons, and he's establishing his reputation. He and his brother Sir Saphir, right? Now his brother Sir Saphir, remember, it has already been mentioned, has been christened, right? He has converted to Christianity, but Palomides has not, right? And Palomides is a great knight, one of the top 5, generally, he's one of the top 5 knights in the world. But he unfortunately chooses as his rival the number 2 knight in the world, right? He falls in love with La Belle Isolde. And now keep in mind that in some ways, he's a perfectly legitimate candidate for La Belle Isolde, right? Especially knowing, if we do know, right, what's coming with Tristram and Isolde. That is to say, the tragic romance that's going to come. In many ways, of course, one can look back at those early scenes and say, you know what? maybe she should have just married Palomides, right? You know, he said he would, you know, be christened, right? He said he was gonna convert and be baptized, and then they could get married, and who knows? Maybe they would have gone on to have a perfectly happy marriage, and all these difficulties would have been avoided. But of course, that's not what's going to happen. And so that is where we see the beginning, but it will be a while before we will see the end of this rivalry between Palomides and Tristram. Remember, Tristram takes Palomides down. He's performing really well. Tristram encounters with him and knocks him off his horse, chases him off the field, and fights with him on foot with swords, and beats him again, right? And makes him swear a vow to give up on Isolde and to not bear arms again for a year, which, as I was saying last time, is a little bit above and beyond. That's a little mean by Tristram. He is, as Lancelot might say, letting him of his honor, right, of his worship, in ways which is perhaps a little bit unkind. Understandable in a rival, right? A rival for your lady, but unkind nevertheless. Okay, so Tristram's got to leave because he's been made, right? So the mother-in-law, Isolde's mother, the Queen of Ireland, she still has that fragment of sword that she took out of the brain pan of Sir Marhault, right? And she does the forensic thing with Tristram's sword and finds that shard fits directly out of the little bite taken out of the sword of Tristram, which they discover while he's in the bath. Again, by the way, that detail, another classic example, right? Again, he's lifting that. Malory's lifting that directly out of the sources. Tristram is always in the bathtub when this is discovered, right? But usually that's put to some kind of dramatic use. Most notably, he will be threatened with the sword, usually even his own sword, while he's in the bath, right, and naked and helpless, and so there's I think in one of it's Isolde herself who is really upset about Marhault's death, and so she, the fact this is the guy who murdered her brother, even though in the other one he's a monster, but whatever, don't worry about it. Anyway, she's upset to find that he is the guy who, turned out to be, and so she's gonna stab him in the bath, but then she doesn't and everything. So, but again, so the dramatic scene is set up, right? There's Tristram in the bath, and it's discovered, and nothing happens, right? And it's just anyway, then he got out of the bath, and then he went before King Anguishans, and Anguishans is it's fine, I don't want to kill you, but you should probably leave because, my wife is probably going to try to poison you or something, so get out while the getting's good, and, and so Tristram and Anguishans leave on very good terms, right? And now he's going to go to take his leave of La Belle Isolde. Then Sir Tristram went unto La Belle Isolde, and took his leave. And then he told what he was, and how a laddie told him that he should never be whole until I come into this country, where the poison was mad, wherethrough I was near my death, had not your ladyship been. Ah, gentle Knecht, said La Belle Isolde, full woe I am of thy departing, for I saw never man that ever I aught so good will to. And therewithal she wept heartily. Madam, said Sir Tristram, ye should understand that my name is Sir Tristram de Lyonesse, gotten of a king and born of a queen, and I promise you faithfully, I shall be all the days of my life your Knecht. Gramercy, said La Belle Isolde, and I promise you thereagainst, I shall not be married this 7 years, but by your assent, and whom that ye will, I shall be married to him, and he will have me, if ye will consent thereto. So that's what Malory would call a large proffer by Isolde there at the end, right? She's being a little forward here, right? There's some fairly heavy hinting going on here, right? I promise you, I'm not going to marry anybody for I will wait for 7 years, which is kind of a big deal, right? I mean, she's already of childbearing years, and she says she's going to wait 7 years to get married. Again, it's a big deal, right? So, you know, like the whole, like, let's wait till we're 30 to get married was not a thing we did in the Middle Ages, right? But anyway, okay, so she's like, I won't marry anybody for 7 years unless you consent to it, right? I will only marry to somebody that you suggest. You know, whoever you might suggest that I get married to. And of course, this in part is setting up the tragedy, which is going to be coming. But we can also see from the beginning here that there seems an easy way in which this this story could pan out perfectly well. Right? The two of them seem well suited to each other. You know, her dad is cool with it, right? I mean, that doesn't seem like that would be a big obstacle. He's, you know, it's not, there is no, like, I mean, there's a little bit of Romeo and Juliet going on in the sense of like the warring houses, right? I mean, Ireland and Cornwall have obviously had some issues in the past and whatever, but, you know, still, it's fine, right? I mean, they like, you know, bygones with King Anguishans and stuff. So, anyway, so, yeah. Oh, and so, yeah, people are talking about life expectancy in the Middle Ages. A really important thing to keep in mind. Life expectancy in the Middle Ages is low just because people die. Right, like people die of disease, and most importantly, women die in childbirth. Of course, when people calculate the life expectancy, it takes into account all of those. You're much likelier to be carried off, right? But sometimes modern people speak as if, you know, they say like, oh, the life expectancy in Middle Ages was only 30, as if therefore people in the Middle Ages considered 30-year-olds old. They didn't, right? It's not, a 30-year-old isn't old, right? An old man or an old woman, when you meet an old man or an old woman in medieval literature, they're still like, you know, 60s and 70s usually is what they would consider old. But like everybody dies young, right? And that's how they would have said it. Like everybody dies young. Like, you know, so if you were carried off at the age of 30, they still would have said you died young. They just would have been not surprised that you were carried off at the age of 30. Not to mention the massive infant mortality rate, right? So you've got the massive infant mortality rate, which skews the numbers a very great deal. It's assumed if you have multiple children, you will probably bury at least one of them. I mean, a family that has not buried at least one child is very, very unusual. And as I said, 1 out of every 3 births on average leads to the death of the mother, right? So childbed mortality also huge. So those are massive factors. And then of course disease carries folks off. So it's not that people aged differently or even that people thought about aging differently. What they thought about is how likely you were to get old, right? So it's not like, again, they had in mind like 30 is the goal. Like if you've hit 30, you're made. But rather that, you know, their life expectancy, like, you know, if we grow old, you know, Lord willing, if we grow old, that will be, you know, that people live to, like, you know, there are stories of 80-year-olds and all that kind of thing. But yeah, anyway, there's a lot of people, it's something that a lot of people talk about sometimes that I just wanted to kind of clarify a little bit. But anyway, okay. So, right. So, this leave-taking, we can see this prospect of the happy ending, right? A simple happy ending. Like Tristram proposed to the girl, right? Why not? What's stopping him? Why not? Right? I mean, okay, mother-in-law issues, right? There would be, you know, that would be, you know, some tense moments at the wedding, sure. Maybe give it some time. But you know, again, the dad's okay, and, you know, they're matched well politically, by birth, you know, this seems fine, Tristram, right? So, and this is one of the elements, by the way, in which the story of Tristram and Isolde is most emphatically different from the story of Lancelot and Guinevere, right? There's no what if with Lancelot and Guinevere. There's no prospect of a happy ending with the story of, other than just sort of remaining in virtuous and admirable love for each other until they both die, right? That's really the only good option for Lancelot and Guinevere. Tristram and Isolde, there is a what if, right? And it is one thing I think that separates their relationship from the relationship of Lancelot and Guinevere, right? There's like, Tristram and Isolde had a shot. They did. They had a shot at happiness. It could have worked out differently. And I think that Malory goes out of his way. Malory goes out of his way, I think, to draw attention to the could have been, right? To the fact that they only end up in a tragic situation because they, and in particular Tristram, screws it up, right? It is by his bad choices that they end up in the tragic situation. I think there as well we have Tristram and Isolde serving as a kind of foil to Lancelot and Guinevere, right? Lancelot and Guinevere are in this situation where they don't meet until after she's married, right? And married to Arthur himself, right? So their situation is fraught with difficulties literally from day one, right? The fact that Tristram and Isolde could have made it, right? Could have gone legit and been fine. Puts the whole thing in a different context, right? There's a sense in which you can't blame Lancelot and Guinevere, right? Where you can blame Tristram and Isolde, and I that seems to be one of the things that he kind of keeps hitting on here. Then Tristram goes back home. And there he lived long in great joy, long time, until at the last there befell a jealousy and an unkindness betwixt King Mark and Sir Tristram. So, what's the issue there with King Mark and Sir Tristram? So the issue, notice, the friction between King Mark and Sir Tristram predates the issues with Isolde, right? King Mark has like never met Isolde. He's like, I mean, he's probably heard of her, right? But she's not on the radar screen. And there's already problems. So again, notice how things are kind of more rotten here in the state of Cornwall than they are in Arthur's court, right? In Arthur's court, Lancelot and Guinevere, everything's fine among all three of them, right? Everything's peachy at the beginning. Things are not peachy from before we even get into a love triangle situation with Mark and Tristram, right? There's already jealousy and unkindness, which shows us, by the way, of course, among other things, you know, Tristram is going to come in for his fair share of criticism, which he richly deserves. But Mark is a jerk. And so, I mean, one of the things that we see here from the beginning, inasmuch as there is jealousy and unkindness betwixt King Mark and Sir Tristram's, that's a bad look for King Mark, right? Sir Tristram is his champion, right? He is the greatest knight of Cornwall. And he's not just the greatest of all of the knights of Cornwall, right? We've already seen how Cornish knights, that's like a byword in this world, right? People make fun of Cornish knights. People say things like, oh, I'm shamed forever. I got unseated by a Cornish knight. Holy cow. I'll never live that down, right? I mean, the Knights of Cornwall are the laughing stock of Britain, and except for Tristram, right? So it's not just that like Tristram is the greatest of all of the Knights of Cornwall. He is the only one of the Knights of Cornwall who distinguishes himself, who, you know, builds an international reputation, right? So Sir Tristram is by far the crown jewel of the court of King Mark, and King Mark should, by all rights, not only be extremely proud of Tristram, but should be all about supporting him, right? There's some sort of obvious expectations of how Mark is going. And even apart from the familial relationship, right? Mark is Tristram's uncle, so he is his kinsman as well. But again, it's just like one thing stacked on another, which should make King Mark be the kindest, best, most generous, most thoughtful benefactor of Sir Tristram that any knight ever had, right? I mean, King Mark should, like, be, you know, buying him cotton candy and a pony on every occasion that he possibly can, right? And instead we see jealousy and unkindness between them, and that's just a character flaw in King Mark, right? He's just not only a bad person, he's a bad king. Okay, so we can see that already right away. And what's the problem? For they loved both own laddie, and she was an heirless wife that hicked Sir Segwarides. Okay, so there's this other dude's wife. So we start off with a love triangle between Tristram and Mark that has nothing to do with La Belle Isolde, right? There's this other dude's wife that they both are in love with, and in a rivalry over. Okay. Yeah, Kurita says, wait, what? Yeah, I know. I always do that same thing too. He's just gotten back from the island. Now keep in mind, he lived long in great joy long time, right? So it's been presumably a couple of years since he came home from Ireland. You know, maybe he and La Belle Isolde are still pen pals, maybe not. But, you know, it's been lots of time. And, yeah, so there's this other woman, exactly. Anyway, Tristram loves her in, you know, some sense of loving. So yeah, as Tarloniel says, Tristram ain't waiting no 7 years. Yeah, no, exactly. He didn't promise, right? She promised, he didn't promise. Anyway, so they're both in love with this other guy's wife, Sir Segwarides. Oh man, I feel bad for Sir Segwarides. Okay, and this laddie loved Sir Tristram as passingly well, and he loved her again, for she was a passing fair laddie, and that espied Sir Tristram as well. I love that phrase. She was really hot, and he totally noticed, right? He was like, hey, she's super attractive, isn't she? I noticed that all by myself, right? Okay. Then King Mark understood that and was jealous, for King Mark loved her passingly well. So it befell upon a day, this laddie sent a dwarf unto Sir Tristramus, and bade him, as he loved her, that he would be with her the next nicht following. Also, so this is the dwarf speaking, she charged you that ye come not to her, but if ye be well armed, for her lord was called a good knecht. Okay, so Sir Segwarides' wife is sending a dwarf with a message to Tristram saying, hey, if you love me, come to my place, right? But bring your weapons and armor because, you know, my husband might come back and, you know, he's a good knight, right? So you got to be ready to defend yourself if you're going to come visit me. Sir Tristram answered to the dwarf and said, recommend me unto my laddie, and tell her I will not fail, but I shall be with her the term that she hath set me. And therewith the dwarf departed. Okay, so he's like, yeah, okay, because I noticed you're attractive, so I'm into this. So I'm going to pursue this assignation, and I'm going to bring my armor, and it's going to be great. Yana, I don't fully understand the nature of dwarfs. Yana's asking a great question. Are dwarfs supposed to indicate something supernatural, or are they just like little people, or a combination? On the one hand, dwarfs, it's very noticeable that we get both dwarfs and giants fairly regularly, right? And the giants seem clearly to be abnormal, right? That is like supernatural, magical in some sense. Dwarfs, less so. In fact, the primary dwarfs that we've seen tend to be servants, right? Of course, most notably Sir Gareth and his dwarf, right, who are both sort of touchingly devoted to each other. You know, they have a great and from all I can see, perfectly lovely relationship, right, between Gareth and his dwarf. So yeah, Crystal Awen, I agree. It's more like a Tyrion kind of dwarf than a Gimli kind of dwarf. Dwarves are not meant to be a separate race. Certainly not like Tolkien's dwarves in that sense. They do seem to be sort of aberrations. One thing I will say, more broadly speaking, we do tend to, it's almost like dwarves and giants. So you got like people, like regular people, and then you got dwarfs and you got giants. And there's this kind of spectrum, right? And dwarfs and giants tend to both of them be morally corrupt. They both tend to be sort of monstrous, usually. Though not monstrous in the same kinds of ways. Giants are likely to be violent and dumb, whereas dwarfs are likely to be sort of mean and cunning. But anyway, they're usually, more often than not, they're villains and sort of untrustworthy. And if anything, honestly, what they kind of remind me of is the White Witch's dwarf in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah. So that's Sakaya, there's no real clear sense of them being really any kind of a people. Or even them to being a people in any kind of ethnic sense. They're, I don't know, like, where do giants come from? You know, there's no giant land. There's no giant lineage. They just, like, they're just giants in the land, right? And there are dwarfs in the land, apparently. I will say that Malory's dwarves seem to be much more neutral. They don't, like, they don't seem to me to be, again, traditionally that's like they're some kind of twisted version of humanity. In normal medieval literature, that's what we just like giants are, except different, right? Differently. But again, this sort of like twisted or you know, they're like stunted people as opposed to sort of out of control people. Remember the giant of Mont Saint Michel in the Lucius of Rome section, the, you know, baby eating, queen raping giant, right? Is a pretty good example of a medieval giant, right? Like, notice how all of his, like, he's very monstrous. All of his appetites are like human appetites, but like monstrous and gigantic, right? That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about sort of like the twisted moral stature, though twisted in different directions, of dwarves and giants in most medieval literature. What Malory's doing with dwarfs, I mean, it'd be interesting for us to continue to watch out for that, actually. You know, maybe we can make some observations, continue to make some observations as we go through here. Notice this dwarf seems to, he's just a messenger, right? He's just the one whom Sir Segwarides, his wife, whose name I don't think we ever learn, is sending as her messenger, right? So, anyway, that's my unsatisfactory answer to that question, but yeah. Stephen covers remembering Goliath, and I agree that concept of gigantism is much more like how giants tend to be treated. It's not like they're a separate race of people. Like, there are giants in the northern hills, and sometimes they come wandering down here like the trolls in The Hobbit, right? It's not like that. It's more like Goliath, right? And there were, like, you know, and Goliath is not alone, right? I mean, there's, you know, there are other places in the Old Testament that kind of give you the sense that there was something a little funky in the genetic pool over in Philistia, right? Because he's not the only Philistine giant, and there were other Philistine giants, one of whom had 6 fingers on each hand, and you're like, okay, there's something chromosomal going on over there in Philistia, right? But that sense of, like, Goliath is just like a huge guy, right? Who is a Philistine. He just, like, among the Philistines, one of them was born a giant, right? It just kind of happens. And that seems to be they're not unhuman. They're not treated like a different race. The dwarfs aren't treated like a different race, right? They are different, but not separate in that way. Brandon's asking, hence why we usually get a singular giant instead of groups. Yeah, sometimes there will be multiples, but only in unusual circumstances, and usually when we're dealing with a sorceress. Actually, like you remember, there was Lancelot in the Book of Sir Lancelot was facing this like row of like multiple giants, right, defending this one castle, but they had been like assembled by a sorceress who was testing him. But yeah, you won't find. I can't think of a single example in medieval literature of like, and then we came upon a giant village, right? Where like the independent, giant culture is, being, like that doesn't really happen. In Josiah, I agree. Their desires and vices are human vices, not fairy. Exaggerated. Both the dwarfish vices and the giantish vices are sort of exaggerated versions of human vice. But yes, human vice. They're not really other in that sense. Yeah. Yep. Okay, sorry. But great question. And let's keep an eye on that. Like I hadn't ever really noticed much about how, I mean, again, you read enough medieval literature and you get used to giants and dwarfs popping up. So giants and dwarfs kind of pop up in this story, sort of like they do in most other stories. But I'd never really noticed before this trend towards good dwarfs, or at least kind of neutral dwarves that aren't treated sort of like freaks, essentially. But we'll see. We'll see what else we see, and keep your eye out for dwarfs. Okay. So he's gonna go. So all right. So a couple things here. As I say in my subtitle, Sir Lancelot, Tristram is not, right. Sir Tristram did not take the hint from La Belle Isolde when she was like, "I won't marry anybody without your permission," right? And he didn't pick up on that, it seems, or opted out of that. But this doesn't mean, apparently, that he has made some kind of Sir Lancelotish vow of chastity, right? Where Sir Lancelot's like, I'm not going to get married because I couldn't be a good husband and still be a professional knight. And I'm, to like pursue my knightly career. And, loving somebody paramours is a really bad idea, and I would never, ever do that. Sir Tristram obviously has no such compunctions, right? Here is Sir Tristram. Now, keep in mind, this might sound really weird to us, this whole situation, like where the two of them are rivals for somebody else's wife, might seem a little bizarre. From a courtly love standpoint, this is totally normal, right? In fact, this situation is kind of an interesting one from a technical courtly love standpoint. It's almost like a sort of, I could imagine, I've referred to Andreas Capellanus many times, The Art of Courtly Love. I could imagine a scenario in Andreas Capellanus. Andreas loves to pose these sort of courtly love scenarios, like, how should it go? What if this happens and this happens? Then, like, how should it work out according to the code of courtly love? So you could see that, right? Okay, so here you've got this lady, right, who's married to this knight named Sir Segwarides, and two men are vying for her love, right? One is a king, and the other is the king's nephew. So the one guy outranks the other guy, but the other guy is the more accomplished knight, right? So which one should she take? Is it better for her to take King Mark because he's the bigger catch politically, in his position, or Tristram because he's the proven knight of prowess, right? So it's almost reads like this sort of theoretical question, right? Especially from Sir Segwarides' wife's perspective. But the one thing that everybody in the courtly love tradition would agree upon, that the one man whom she should not be paying attention to is her husband, right? Because that's totally irrelevant to the love situation. And the fact that she's married to somebody is obviously no real impediment to her being loved by King Mark and Sir Tristram. Nor, if they were married to other people, would it be at all weird for them to be not only in love with her, but vying with each other for the love of her. It's the kind of thing that happens. Now, it's a little shocking, perhaps. I always find it a little bit shocking because Tristram and Isolde, right? You're ready for the Tristram and Isolde story. And now they've just met. And she's like, I shall wait for 7 years. And he's like, okay, honey, I'm going back home now. And then he immediately hops into bed with some other dude's wife, right? And it's like, okay, Sir Tristram, not exactly the paragon of love, at least not as far as Isolde is concerned. It started off, right? Sounded like we were rolling. We had the rivalry with Palomides and everything. You got to think that somewhere Sir Palomides is like, see, Isolde, look, right? You know, you chose that loser, and here I am, still pining faithfully for you, right? Okay, so he's supposed to come, and he's supposed to bring his armor. Now, okay, so he fights somebody on the way, right? He runs into somebody else, and he gets attacked by Mark, right? So him and Mark fight, and Mark wounds him in the chest. And therewithal, Sir Tristram rode forth sore wounded to the laddie, and found her abiding him at a postern, and there she welcomed him fire, and either housed other in armes. And so she let put up his horse in the best wise, and thon she unarmed him. And so they supped lichtly, and went to bed with great joy and pleasance. And so in his raging, no commentary on that word, and so in his raging he took no keep of his grieve wound that King Mark had given him. And so Sir Tristram bled both the oversheet and the nether sheet, and the pillows and the head sheet. So Sir Tristram has gotten his blood everywhere, right? So he was focusing on business and manfully ignoring his wound, right? So here's Tristram bleeding from a flesh wound on his chest, right? And staining the marriage bed of Sir Segwarides, which is where he is enjoying his assignation with his lady, staining the sheets with blood. And notice the coverage here, right? The upper sheet, the oversheet, the nether sheet, the pillows, and the head sheet, right? The pillowcases, right? Everything is covered in blood. Yeah, so remember this scene. This will be important later. But notice the image that we get here. And my subtitle for this was a defiled marriage bed. And I can't help but think that that's deliberate, right? Those of you who know the New Testament will remember the verse that I'm thinking of, right? And the marriage bed is undefiled. This marriage bed is defiled, right? I've said that it's no big deal, right, to love somebody else's wife. In fact, that's how you're supposed to do it in the courtly love tradition. This scene does not inspire me with confidence, right? One of the things, this tension between the quite clear moral situation and the courtly love tradition, right? The courtly love tradition is pointedly, flamboyantly flying in the face of traditional Christian morality, right? Not just flying in the face of it, deliberately turning it on its head. And that's, again, it's part of the game. It's part of the fun of the courtly love tradition, is to take the Christian moral sanctions and not just ignore them, but reverse them, right? So that loving your husband becomes what's wrong, right? And committing adultery is virtuous love, right? That's the game of courtly love, but there's that tension, right? Clearly there's that tension. And you see in a lot of, there are many, many stories in which people don't play the game, especially husbands quite often, right? Of the ladies in question, don't in fact play along with this. So one question which is often challenging in medieval love stories is trying to figure, so where is this story situated in that, in that struggle between the sort of at least half joking, if not entirely joking, sort of anti-morality of courtly love and traditional morality? Like, how disturbed are we supposed to be? There are some where I think we're supposed to be very disturbed by it, such as Jean de Meun's much larger second half of the Romance of the Rose, for instance, one of the most famous works of courtly love in the Middle Ages. And there are others who I think are sort of more concerned. Remember, we've already gotten Lancelot and his virtues, right? So given what we saw from Lancelot, I think we have reason to be skeptical of this kind of carrying on, right? We could already play the what would Lancelot say game, right? And Lancelot would not do this. Lancelot wouldn't do this. And so when we see the marriage bed of this woman covered in blood, so she has taken this knight who is not her husband to her bed, and she ends up, her body and her bed completely stained with his blood, right? The whole marriage bed is now filthy with his blood. That's not a good look, right? That is, I think, I feel fairly confident in saying we're supposed to find this sort of dubious, right? Yeah, so Brian asks, is there moral judgment being passed on Tristram for taking advantage of the assignation? Yeah, it's well, in a sense, it's kind of gentle. Thank you, Aowen. Crystal Aowen looked it up. Yeah, Hebrews 13:4. I couldn't remember the citation, but yes, marriage. That's the marriage bed is undefiled verse. Anyway, so yes, I do think, Tristram noticing how attractive she is and being like, heck yeah, I'm into this, right? I think that this is an indictment of Tristram here. Yeah, Mike, that's well recalled. Of course, what should we be thinking of when we're thinking of bloody sheets? What do we associate bloody sheets with in the Middle Ages? Bloody sheets, kind of a big deal, actually, in the Middle Ages. Yeah. Marriage and virginity. Absolutely. It was not uncommon for marriage sheets to be displayed, like the blood on marriage sheets to be displayed as a sort of affirmation of the virginity of the woman when they were married. So it's kind of a big deal, right? So she's not a virgin, she's married, right? But to have the bloody sheets, I know that from a modern perspective, you might not think of bloody sheets as a symbol of purity, but it was, right? Like, that's the association we have with bloody sheets. When we see bloody sheets, we're thinking of chastity, right? Purity in marriage. And this is that obviously turned on its head, right? So the adulterous relationship here gives us bloody sheets, which are very much more thoroughly bloody than is normal, right? And it's one of the things I think, when he doesn't just say there was blood on the sheets. He's like, no, like, don't get me wrong, right? Oversheet, nether sheet, pillows, head sheet, blood everywhere, right? Raging. Remember that word on which I am not going to comment further. So yeah, it's a bad look. It's a bad look, and Tristram looks bad. There's no two ways about this. Even if we are willing to be okay with him being over Isolde, right, and just moving on to Sir Segwarides, his wife, if that doesn't bother us, and we have less direct reason to feel sure that should bother us, the narrator doesn't seem bothered by it, right? But nevertheless, this is, I think, legitimately questionable. But wait, there's more. And within a while there come on before that warned her that her lord Sir Segwarides was near hand within a bow draught. Okay, maybe, have somebody look out a little further away than that. So she made Sir Tristram as to arise, and so he armed him, and took his horse, and so departed. So by then was Sir Segwarides, her lord, come, and when he found his bed troubled and broken, he went near and looked by candlelight. Now, the broken bed just means I don't think they actually broke the bed. I mean, there's raging and then there's raging, right? His bed troubled and broken means like it's not made, right? Like something's been happening in the bed, right? Is what he's noticing when he comes in. And he looked by candlelight and saw that there had lain a wounded knecht. Ah, false traitoress, he sighed, why hast thou betrayed me? And therewithal he swang out a sword and sighed, but if thou tell me all, who hath been here, now shalt thou die. All right, so, yeah, exactly, Brian. One of the things that is the obvious consequence of the bloody bed, apart from its symbolic significance, is that, it's a giveaway, right? Sir Segwarides, it cannot be hidden. It is manifest evidence of what has happened. I agree, Karita, the bed frame being broken would be funnier. No question. That would be increased comic value. And hey, like raging, what can I say? It's quite possible. I just don't think that's the inescapable interpretation of it. We could go that direction if you choose to, and I agree, for comic value, it's better. But, okay, so he's going to kill her, not period, right? He's not just going to kill her. He has caught her functionally in the act of adultery, right? Not exactly, I mean, he's not caught them, in flagrante, but, he has some pretty good evidence that his wife has committed adultery, but he's going to spare her on condition that she tells him who it was. Okay. He chases after him, and of course Tristram beats him, right? And it's kind of unresolved. Apart from Tristram apparently getting away with it, right? And everything's fine. Okay. Then a little bit later. Fan hit befell upon a day that the good knecht Sir Bleoberis de Ganys, brother unto Sir Blamor de Ganys, and nigh cousin unto the good knecht Sir Launcelot de Lac. So this Sir Bleoberis come unto the court of King Mark, and there he asked King Mark to give him a boon. What gift that I will ask in this court? So he asks him, like, rash vow, promise me anything I ask for. This is a fun game that wandering knights like to play with kings. When the king heard him ask so, he marvelled of his asking, but because he was a knecht of the Round Table and of great renown, King Mark granted him his whole asking. So, King Mark maybe wouldn't do this normally, right? But he's surprised that this famous knight is doing this. I mean, Sir Bleoberis, not only a knight of the Round Table, but nigh kin of Sir Launcelot de Lake. And as we can see, as becomes clear throughout this whole Tristram story, right? Those French knights, the knights of Sir Lancelot's kin, all of them have a very high reputation, right? Sir Bleoberis and Sir Blamor are just Lancelot's cousins, but still, they're close family, and they all have a really high reputation. Karita, I agree. Sir Bleoberis is one of my favorite names for knights. It's pretty classic. I agree. So anyway, okay. So knowing who he is, right? Trusting who he is, and not possibly wanting to insult somebody, both with this much personal renown and with his connections, right? Both to King Arthur and Sir Lancelot. King Mark's like, okay, I'll give you whatever you ask. Then sighed Sir Bleoberis, I will have the fairest laddie in your court that me list to choose. I may not say nay, said Mark. Now choose here at your adventure. And so Sir Bleoberis did choose Sir Segwarides' wife, and took her by the hand, and so went his way with her. Look, he noticed she was attractive too. And so he took his horse, and mad set her behind his squire, and rode upon his way. All right, so what's Sir Bleoberis up to here, right? What makes you, as a famous knight, come into a random court in Cornwall and be like, hey, I'm near the Cornish court. I know what I'll do. I'll go and get myself a lady, right? So I'm going to go to the king and make him promise to give me anything I want. I'm going to be like, hey, can I take the hottest lady in the court for myself? And he'll be like, okay, because I promised you, right? And then I'm going to walk off and I'm like, hey, free lady, right? Like, why does he do this exactly? And he's making trouble. Right? So, is Sir Bleoberis's plan to get himself a lady? Like, is this in like the Sir Bleoberis, like, how to pick up chicks, you know, strategy book? Is that what's happening here? Is this like how Sir Bleoberis finds a date? Right? And my answer to that is no. No, I don't think that this is how Sir Bleoberis gets dates. Why would he do this? What do you think? We're not told exactly why, but why do you think he would do this? What's his goal? Why come into the court and say, I'm going to take away the fairest lady in the entire court? Just like for fun. Yes, Sakaya, exactly. This is a challenge, right? He is making trouble on purpose. This is an indirect way, an indirect but a very effective way of testing himself against the best knights that this court has to offer. Because it's a pretty safe bet, right? That the most beautiful lady in the court is going to be connected with one of the most powerful knights in the court, right? I mean, that's kind of a given, you know, from a courtly love standpoint. So, and of course, is true, right? Sir Tristram is her lover, and Sir Segwarides is her husband, and King Mark is into her too. So he's got it, right? Sir Bleoberis has hit the nail on the head here, right? So he takes her off expecting to be pursued. The whole goal, really, is so, I mean, it would be weird. I know what you're going to say. You're going to be like, and this isn't weird, right? But it would be weird for him to come into the court and just be like, I'm itching to fight y'all, right? Like, I'm just going to, like, hey, you over there, come over here and fight me, right? I mean, that's weird. That's aggressive, right? No, what you do is you create a situation where you lead them to challenge you, right? That's cool. That, I think, is clearly what Sir Bleoberis is doing. It's very clear from the later conversations that happen. Sir Bleoberis is not interested in the lady, right? He's not going to take her to himself. Even when in the end he kind of ends up with her, he like sends her back to her husband, right? He's not interested in the lady. Again, it's not about getting a date. It's about provoking a response. And by the way that he has framed this, he has created a situation where he is going to get to be challenged by the greatest knight or knights in the entire court so that he can build his own worship, right? Hey, I took out the best that Cornwall had to offer. Yeah, so, yeah, well, see, Karina, you could provoke them to attack you by insulting them or something, but see, that's rude, right? That's unknightly behavior for Sir Bleoberis. Whereas just coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to claim the greatest lady in this court as my prize, that's okay, right? I mean, notice he's not threatening to do anything horribly inappropriate with her, right? He's like, I'm going to become her champion. Right? Like, it's kind of a one-sided arrangement, admittedly, right? But I'm going to take it, and she's going to become my lady, and I'm going to ride around with my... Yeah, I mean, you remember how remember Sir Gawain and Sir Marhault and Sir Owain, right? When they're like, my damsel, what happened to my damsel, right? You get assigned a damsel, and then you defend her. You know, unless you're Gawain, in which she ditches you because she thinks you're a loser, but... But that's kind of the situation that Sir Bleoberis is creating here, right? So that now he has the opportunity and the right, in a sense, to defend her because she was given to him, right? She was put under his protection. She was put into his custody by King Mark, right? So there you go. That's legit now, right? So now if one of the knights wants to defend her, right, wants to keep her from being carried off by Sir Bleoberis, now he's got to be the aggressor, and Sir Bleoberis is like, I must defend the lady from this, like, obviously hostile knight who's coming to attack me. So it's kind of clever, way more delicate than insulting his mom, way more it puts him in the right, you see. Again, if he just comes in and he's like, I challenge you to a fight because I feel like fighting you, again, then he's the jerk, right? Now, no way, man. He's in the right now. So that's interesting. Now, good. James and Zachary both are thinking, James Stevens and Zach Coman are both thinking that, like, isn't this kind of small potatoes? Like, is there any worship in besting a Cornish knight? Did any good thing ever come out of Cornwall? Yeah, exactly. So you could say, in that sense, Sir Bleoberis is kind of slumming here. Or you could also say that the reputation of the Cornish court is already rising since Tristram has arrived, right? Honestly, I kind of suspect that it's Tristram that he's trying to provoke here. But yeah, anyway, so, but again, this is not the greatest of exploits by Sir Bleoberis, because it is Cornwall after all, right? And everybody knows what Cornish knights are like. Yeah. Okay. But let's keep going. I keep interrupting my reading here tonight. Okay. Oh, he set her behind his squire. Right. Okay. When Sir Segwarides heard tell that this laddie was gone with a knecht of King Arthur's court. So this is her husband, mind, right? Then he armed him and rode after that knecht to rescue his laddie. Oh, this is charming, right? He's going to rescue his own wife, right? That's nice. So when Sir Bleoberis was gone with this laddie, King Mark and all the court was wroth that she was had away. Tristram is there, right? Tristram is there in the court while this is happening. Then were there certain laddies that knew that there was great love between Sir Tristramas and her. It's like an open secret in the court, right? And also, that laddie loved Sir Tristramas above an all knechtes. They know there's a mutual thing going on, right? The ladies know. The ladies always know, right? The ladies know that there's a reciprocal love relationship between Tristram and Sir Segwarides' wife. Then there was one laddie that rebuked Sir Tristramas in the horriblest wise, and called him coward knecht, that he would, for shame of his knechthood, to see a laddie so shamefully taken away from his uncle's court. But she meant that either of him loved other with entire heart. But Sir Tristramas answered her thus. So, okay, so she's speaking in code, right? So she won't say, hey, you know, you two are lovers, you're supposed to defend her. That's part of the love gig, you know? She can't say that openly because that would be a breach of secrecy, and breach of secrecy is a big deal in the courtly love tradition, right? So all the ladies are in the know, but they can't openly talk about it. So she's like, it was shameful to see a lady so shamefully taken away from your uncle's court, right? You shouldn't have allowed that on principle, Sir Tristram. By which she means, dude, she's your lady. That was horrible. What's wrong with you? Tristram responds, fair laddie, it is not my part to have ado in such matters, while her lord and husband is present here. And if so be that her lord had not been here in this court, I think it's a typo, this court, then for the worship of this court, peradventure I would have been her champion. And if so be Sir Segwarides speed not well, it may happen that I will speak with that good knecht, or ever he pass far fro this country. Tristram's response, decoded, is, dude, I was being tactful, right? Her husband is here. Had I stepped in and been like, I shall go rescue her. No, Mr. Segwarides, right? You stay here. I'm going off and rescuing your wife. That would have been tactless, right? And even could potentially be viewed as a breach of secrecy, right? His openly avowing that it was his place to rescue her, whereas openly, overtly, it's her husband's place to defend her, right? So Tristram, is trying to get himself off, right? He's like, I'm in an awkward place, but he's like, if he doesn't speed, and by the way, that's an important word, right? To speed has nothing to do with traveling quickly, right? To speed, it just means to succeed, right? Should he not speed well, meaning should things not work out well for him, right? Then I'll definitely go, right? But I have to give him first crack at it because he's her husband, and so outwardly he has the right, not me, right? Exactly, Katrina. Translation, if he gets his butt kicked, then I'll go after her myself. And notice that he's expecting that, right? It may happen that I will speak with that good knight, or ever he pass far fro this country, right? Tristram's like, I don't think Sir Bleoberis is going to get out of Cornwall before I meet with him, right? It's going to happen. And so, of course, that's a little bit of an insult to Sir Segwarides, but not a huge insult because Sir Bleoberis is kin of Lancelot, right? I mean, he's a great knight. So I don't know if he's top 10, but he's probably top 20 easily, Sir Bleoberis. So maybe even top 10, maybe. So, you know, no diss to Sir Segwarides. Now, Likelyabot on Twitch is wondering if there's any implication that he wants to let the husband attack so that maybe knowing that the husband is almost certain to die, that if that he'll like get killed or something and clear the way for him. But that assumes Likelyabot that he wants to marry her. Right? I mean, if his interest were to marry Sir Segwarides' wife, then yeah, it's in his benefit to enable, you know, to allow Sir Segwarides to encounter as much danger as possible, right? But I don't see any reason at all to think that Tristram is the slightest bit interested in marriage with Sir Segwarides' wife. I think he has achieved the consummation of his desire with Sir Segwarides' wife. I think he's happy with their relationship, and it doesn't there's why get rid of the husband, right? He's no more than a brief inconvenience because, of course, you know, Sir Tristram's already dealt with that inconvenience. I mean, they've already fought, you know, after the whole bloody sheet incident, yeah. Curtis says our boy isn't into the whole commitment thing. You know, yeah, there seems to be a little bit of that, or at least this is as much commitment as he's interested in. So Tristram feels like he's playing this smart, and he's defending himself, even on a courtly love footing, right, with the ladies of the court. You know, he's like, no, hang on, I'm innocent here, right? I'm playing this right. It's not that I'm not going to defend her, but I gotta. For show, let the husband go first, and then I'm going to find. Don't worry, I got this, right? It's not anything bad, he says. Okay. And therewithal, anon, Sir Tristramus asked them from whence they come and whither they wold. So this is he meets these other, you know, the other two knights, right? Sir Sagramor and Sir Dodinas, isn't it that he meets? So they're Arthur's knights while he's on the way to fight Sir Bleoberis. From whence they come and whither they wold and what they did in those marches. So Sir Sagramor looked upon Sir Tristramus and had scorn of his words and said to him again, Sir, be ye a knight of Cornwall? Whereby askest you, said Sir Tristramus. For it is seldom seen, sighed Sir Sagramor, that ye Cornish knightes been valiant men in arms. For within these 12 hours there are met with us one of you Cornish knightes, and great words he spak, and anon with little meeked he was laid to the earth. And as I true, sighed Sir Sagramor, that ye wold have the same hansel. I'm going to give you the same present that I gave to that other guy, right? Fire lordes, sighed Sir Tristramus. It may so hap that I may better withstand you than he did. And whether ye wool or nil, I will have ado with you, because he was my cousin that ye beat. And therefore here do your best, and weet you well, but if ye quit you the better here upon this ground, own Knecht of Cornwall shall beat you both. Tristram's an underdog, right? And the fact that he comes from a group of knights which are scorned is an interesting thing for him, right? On the one hand, you know, he's kind of tainted with being a knight of Cornwall. Now, he is the greatest Cornish, and we talked about this some before. So it's kind of interesting that he sort of emerges from Cornwall, and that, you know, and it becomes this sort of irony that one of the greatest of all knights in all of history is a Cornish knight, right? But he's kind of fighting this reputation from the beginning, as we see, and of course he's going to beat Sir Sagramore and Sir Donanas in their opinion, not of Cornish knights in general, but of Tristram in particular, is going to change. All right. So Sir Bleoberis, he finally meets with Sir Bleoberis, who has this opinion. In good faith, said Sir Bleoberis, as for me, I would be loth to fecht with you, but sithen ye follow me here to have this laddie, I shall proffer you kindness and courtesy right here upon this ground. This laddie shall be set betwixt us both, and who that will go unto, and that she will go unto of you and me, let him have her in peace. I will well, said Sir Tristramas, for as I deem, she will leave you and come to me. Ye shall prove anon, said Sir Bleoberis. So when she was set betwixt them, she said these wordes unto Sir Tristramas. Weet you thou well, Sir Tristramas de Lyonesse, that but lat thou wast the man in all the world that I most loved and trusted, and I went ye had loved me again, above all laddies. But when thou sawst this knecht lead me away, thou madest no cheer to rescue me, but sufferedst my lord Sir Segwarides to ride after me. But until that time I went ye had loved me, and therefore now I forsook thee, and never to love thee more. And therewithal she went unto Sir Bleoberis. When Sir Tristramas saw her do so, he was wonderly wroth with that laddie, and ashamed to come to the court. But Sir Bleoberis said unto Sir Tristramas, Ye are in the blame, for I hear by this laddie's wordes that she trusted you above in all earthly knechtes, and, as she saith, ye have deceived her. Therefore, wit you well, there may no man hold that wool away, and rather than ye should heartily be displeased with me, I wold ye had her, and she wold abide with you. Sir Bleoberis is in an uncomfortable position. He kind of wanted her to choose Tristram, right? Notice he thought that he had come up with a brilliant solution that was going to get everybody out of awkwardness. Or he does not want to do battle to the uttermost with Tristram. Not only because he's now pretty sure that Tristram is going to kick his butt, right? And he doesn't really want to die. This was kind of a lark anyway from the beginning, right? And he certainly doesn't want to die in this quarrel. But he can't just give her up. If he just gives her up, he would lose worship. But if so he's like, perfect solution, right? I'll let her choose. She'll choose to go with Tristram. He'll be happy. I'll be happy. We don't have to fight to the death. Everybody wins, right? And then she's like, no, I'm not going to go with him. He's a jerk, right? I thought he loved me, but he lied because he didn't come after me. I choose you, Sir Bleoberis. And he's like, oh, crap. Now I'm in trouble, right? Because now Sir Tristram's going to have to come back. And notice, Sir Tristram is shamed, like he's ashamed to come back to the court because he's going to go back to the court without the lady, which is going to lead everybody to the logical conclusion that he lost. Right, that he attempted to get her back and failed, right? So, oh man, serious losing face for Sir Tristram here. Notice that, and David, I agree, the rejection of Tristram by the lady is yet another surprise in this rather surprising episode, right? Notice she's not having any of it. And this is important. Again, this will be important. The bloody bed will be important later, that whole situation. This situation will be important later too, right? All of these situations, the like, do you go and rescue your beloved if she is taken, right? How do you do that? What are the responsibilities for that? What are the implications of that? Notice Tristram was like, hang on, if I do that, if I push her husband aside and like, no, she is mine to go pursue, then he's all but openly accusing her of adultery in front of the whole court, right? So he's like, I was trying to be tactful. And she's like, tact, forget it. You're a jerk, right? You lied to me. She is not taking his tact story, right? Deceived is the word that Bleoberis uses. Bleoberis doesn't know the whole story, right? So he's like, she apparently trusted in you, and I guess you failed her trust, right? You should have come after her, right? Yeah, now, Tarlonio, I think that you're right. Everyone does not seem to be on the same page about the rules for courtly love here. I think that that's a true thing that we see. But here's one of the take-home stories here. What would Sir Lancelot say? Sir Lancelot would say, Sir Tristram, if you weren't sleeping with her, there wouldn't be a problem here, right? The only problem is that you have taken her as your lover paramours. So if they were sleeping together, if he just admired, if they were doing the nice non-sexual love, pure love that Guinevere and Lancelot are doing, then he could be her champion and there wouldn't be any problem, right? It's the fact that Tristram is morally compromised by the adultery that makes it sketchy for him to step forward and be like, okay, Sir Segwarides, no, I will go, right? Lancelot can do that when it comes to Guinevere, right? Tristram can't do that with Sir Segwarides' wife because he is in fact committing adultery with her. And once he crosses that line, he compromises his own position and puts him, he created this situation, right? He made this bloody bed and now he has to lie in it, and he ends up being shamed as a consequence of it. Again, keep this in mind. This will become relevant not just later in the Sir Lancelot story, the story of Sir Lancelot and Guinevere. It will become relevant again in the Tristram and Isolde story. Let's keep moving. So when this was done, King Mark cast all the wise that he meeked to destroy Sir Tristramus. Bad king. Bad king, King Mark, right? Not only is he not appreciative of and cherishing and promoting the honor and worship of the crown jewel of the court of Cornwall, right? He's actually plotting to destroy Tristram. He wants Tristram dead because he's envious of Tristram. Okay, so he has a new scheme to get him killed. Then imagined in himself to send Sir Tristramus into Ireland for La Belle Isolde. For Sir Tristramus had so prized her for her beauty and her goodness that King Mark said he would wed her. Whereupon he prayed Sir Tristramus to talk his way into Ireland for him on message. And all this was done to the intent to slay Sir Tristramus. Notice Malory is not allowing any uncertainty about that point, right? Why does King Mark want to marry La Belle Isolde? It is a mechanism for destroying Tristram. That's the whole... He doesn't want to marry Isolde. I mean, she sounds cute, right? But that's not the point. It's all a plot. It's a plot to get him killed. That's the point. Notwithstanding, he would not refuse the message, that is, Tristram wouldn't refuse it, for no danger, nother peril that might fall, for the pleasure of his uncle. So to go he made him ready in the most goodliest wise that might be devised, for he took with him the most goodliest connectes that he might find in the court, and they were arrayed after the guise that was used in that time to the most goodliest manner. So what were the people like when they went? They were goodly. No, they were goodliest, right? I love the word goodliest. But anyway, okay, so we're, he's fine, right? He is ready to go into Ireland. He is undaunted by the danger or the peril, and he's going to go for the pleasure of his uncle. Now, Mark's motivation is made perfectly plain by Malory, right? Tristram's motivation is less clear, right? All we're told is for the pleasure of his uncle. to please his uncle? Is the animosity one-sided? Remember the parallel that we were talking about last week, right? At the beginning of their relationship, King Mark and Tristram were Saul and David, right? That was the parallel that we got in the whole truage situation, right, with Marhalt. Marhalt was Goliath, though an unusually well-dressed and well-behaved Goliath, and Tristram was David, and Mark was King Saul. Those of you who know the story will remember that the animosity between King Saul and David, which continues thereafter and is born of Mark's envy of the young hero whose reputation so exceeds his own. Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s, as they sing in the streets of Jerusalem. That envy is one-sided envy, and the animosity is totally one-sided, right? And David remains faithful to Saul, even long after Saul is attempting to kill him, right? And taking active steps in order to get him killed. Again, notice the parallel here. King Mark in the Bible, King Saul says to David, like, David can marry Saul's daughter if he brings him, 100 or 1,000? 100, I think. 100 foreskins of Philistines. In other words, like, he go out and kill 100 of their warriors. And he's obviously hoping that at least one of them is going to manage to kill David, right? Surely David won't be able to overcome 100 of them, right, in order to sort of prove himself here. So he sends him off, like a father-in-law sometimes does, right? Send off the potential son-in-law to something that will hopefully get him killed in order to win your daughter. That's not exactly the dynamic here. We don't have a father-daughter situation here, but again, like the King Saul figure sends off the young David figure in order to do something challenging in the hope that he's going to end up getting killed. Okay, but Tristram seems to, if I'm understanding this properly, he seems to be faithful to Mark, despite the fact that Mark is a terrible jerk who's actively trying to get him killed now, right? Like, okay, my uncle says I should go, so I'm going to faithfully go, even though I'm being set up. Now, Catriona, we're not given great reasons for why Mark wants to get Tristram killed. Just envy, right? Tristram is showing him up. Instead of taking pride in Tristram and being like, yeah, here he is, the boast of the court of Cornwall, right? The best thing to come out of Cornwall since, well, anything, actually. Instead of having that attitude and taking pride in Tristram, Mark sees him as a threat. Mark feels overshadowed by him and wants him gone. Again, notice the rivalry about Sir Segwarides' wife, right? That Tristram is one-upping him. Mark feels personally threatened, his own worship personally threatened by this. So, Catriona, why does he think sending him to Ireland to get Isolde will get him killed? Well, remember, Tristram was likely to be killed, right? He kind of just escaped by the sufferance of King Anguishans. Now, it's true that the King of Ireland quite likes him, Tristram, right? But the Queen of Ireland, not so much. So the odds of somebody saying, hey, this is the scumbag who killed Sir Marhalt, let's off him, fairly high, right? So that seems to be what King Mark is kind of banking on, right? And David Urbach is saying this is so different from other versions of this story that I had heard before. It is very different, very different. Okay, so he's going to go over. On the way, he gets a stroke of luck, right? By chance, he runs into King Anguishans, the King of Ireland, La Belle Isolde's dad, right? And he's in a spot of bother, right? He's in trouble. So here's the conversation between King Anguishans and Sir Tristram. "Ah, gentle Knight," sighed the king unto Sir Tristramus, "now have I great need of you. Never had I so great need of no Knicht's help." Remember, double negatives are just twice as negative as single negatives, right? So "never had I so great need of no Knicht's help" it's a double negative, showing that that's how much never he had not ever been in such great need. Like he's super great need, right? It is a double unprecedented levels of need by King Anguishans. I love double negatives that way. I mean, the modern double negatives are fun, and they can often be sort of fun, employed amusingly. But the medieval double negatives are just kind of, I love it. You just pile on more negatives to make it more negative. Come on, that's charming, right? Anyway, okay. "How so, my good lord?" sighed Sir Tristramus. "I shall tell you," sighed the king. "I am assummoned and appealed from my country for the death of a knight that was kin unto the good knight Sir Launcelot. Wherefore Sir Blamor de Ganis, Sir Bleoberis his brother, hath appealed me to fight with him, other for to find a knight in my stead. And well I wot," sighed the king, "these that are coming of King Ban's blood, as Sir Launcelot and these other, are passing good hard knights and hard men for to win in battle, as any that I know now living." "Sir," said Sir Tristramus, "for the good lordship ye showed unto me in Ireland, and for my laddie your daughter's sack, la belle Isolde, I will tak the battle for you upon this condition, that ye shall grant me two things. One is that ye shall swear unto me that ye are in the richt, and ye were never consenting to the knight's death." "Sir," then sighed Sir Tristramus, "when I have done this battle, if God give me grace to speed, that ye shall give me a reward, what thing reasonable that I will ask you." "So God me help," sighed the king, "ye shall have whatsoever ye will." Okay, so on two conditions he's willing to. Now, King Anguishans is in a tough place, right? He's being appealed. That's a legal term, right? He is being assummoned, which means he's being extradited from Ireland, right? He was served a summons to come to this court, and he's been appealed. That's when you're indicted, right? So he's summoned means he's being told to show up, right? Appealed means he's being indicted publicly by Sir Blamor de Ganis, and accused of murder, right? Of contriving the death of this knight, this knight who is a kin unto Sir Blamor de Ganis. So King Anguish, has to fight, and he doesn't want to do that. Right, he knows he's gonna lose. Sir Blamor is so yeah, he's in trouble. But notice Tristram's two conditions. Condition number one: swear to me that you're actually in the right here. You didn't actually murder this dude, right? If you'll tell, that's important. Notice Tristram doesn't just say like, "Hey man, right or wrong, I got your back." He will only fight for him if King Anguishans will swear that he was in the right, that he didn't kill the guy. And then he also needs to promise that he will give him whatever reasonable thing I'll ask. Yeah, Karita, that is unusual, right? Notice this is Tristram explicitly saying, "I'm not trying to sucker you into a rash vow here," right? You can feel, because if I ask something and you don't want to give it, you can tell me it's unreasonable, right? So when they cite, and this is the second time this has happened, when they say, "I'll do anything reasonable," or "I'll only ask you to give me something reasonable," they're giving the swearer of the vow an out clause, right? So it's fine. Okay, so notice the king is not interested in it. He's like, "I will give you whatsoever ye will," right? "I'll give you anything you want. I don't care if it's reasonable or not. I'll give you anything you want if you pull my bacon out of the fire here." And he does, right? So after the battle, He beats Sir Blamor de Gannis, and there's that really fun moment where Sir Blamor is insisting on being killed. So they appeal, and Tristram's like, I don't want to kill this dude. And, you know, the court's like, we don't really want to see him die either. And Blamor's like, no, I totally insist. Kill me. And so they're like, Sir Bleoberis, surely you can intervene with your brother here. And Sir Bleoberis is like, no, I insist that you kill him too. Right? And so anyway, they finally get out of it and manage to force Sir Blamor de Gannis to accept his life and not die. After all of that drama is over, Tristram goes back to Anguishans. Now it is time. Sir, this is all that I will desire, that ye will give la belle Isolde, your doctor, not for myself, but for mine uncle, King Mark, that shall have her to wife, for so have I promised him. Alas, sighed the king, I had lever than all the land that I have, that ye would have wedded here yourself. Right, here's King Anguishans finally spelling out what La Belle Isolde was implying before, right? Like, hey, you know, you really should marry her yourself. Sir, and I did so. I were shamed for ever in this world, and false of my promise. Therefore, sighed Sir Tristramas, I require you, hold your promise that ye promised me. For this is my desire, that ye will give me La Belle Isolde to go with me unto Cornwall, for to be wedded unto King Mark mine uncle. As for that, King Anguish sighed, ye shall have her with you to do with her what it please you. That is for to say, if that ye list to wed her yourself, that is me leavest, and if ye will give her unto King Mark your uncle, that is in your choice. Notice what the situation that Malory has created here, right? Malory has created this situation which looks like Tristram is trapped in tragical and conflicting desires, right? Like as if he had gotten suckered into a rash vow where he promised on his worship, you know, to do what Mark says, and he says, bring me La Belle Isolde to be my wife. And he's like, oh, the one thing I would least like to do, and now I must do it or else I am forever shamed, right? But I must fulfill my promise to my uncle. And so despite the fact that I love her and would marry her myself, no, I cannot. I must now be the instrument of my own unhappiness. But I mean, it writes itself, right? This kind of thing that we can, you know. Okay, fine. That looks like the situation. But notice how far Malory is going out of his way to like emphasize Tristram is not trapped here. He is not trapped, right? Her father, La Belle Isolde's own father, is like, no, please marry my daughter. No, I insist. I really want you to be the one to marry my daughter instead, right? You know, and Tristram's like, no, I've promised. And he's like, okay. So, and then he even tries to give Tristram an out at the end, right? Where he's like, okay, I'm not even going to say, like, so you can't blame me. Like, I'm not going to say that I'm giving her to Mark, right? I'm going to give her to you. And you can do with her whatever you want. And notice how he clarifies. It's like, hang on, there are some things you can't do with her. Right? Like, I'm not giving you carte blanche with my daughter. What I'm saying is, you can marry her yourself. You have two options, right? You can bring her back to King Mark if you want to, or you can marry her yourself. And that is me leavest. That's what I would prefer, right? That is what I most desire. So he is absolutely crystal clear on what his intentions, what his preference is, right? Thomas says, well, what does she want? Well, Thomas, of course, that doesn't actually matter. You know, let's be real, right? She is being married off by her father. That's how this works. Keep in mind, Thomas, that's the whole root of the courtly love system. Let us not forget, one of the ways in which the whole system is set on its head, again, deliberately and playfully by the courtly love system, is that the woman has 100% of the authority. She is the deciding figure. She is the one who must be wooed, and she is the one who chooses whom she loves and under what conditions she loves. The woman has ultimate power and is treated like a monarch.
Again, that's part of the joke. Even the kiss, right? Why do you kiss the lady? Why do you ask for it's the kiss of fealty that you're giving to her, right? So in the courtly love context, it's all about the woman's choice, all about the woman's choice. Notice, remember, even with Tristram and Sir Segwarides' wife, right? She's the one who initiates. Remember, she was the one who sends the dwarf and is like, hey, hot stuff, come to my place while my husband is away, right? Tristram does not suggest that, right? She does. But when it comes to marriage, the men are in charge, right? It's the father who distributes his daughter in marriage, and the daughter gets absolutely no say in that. Again, that's the system that's being reversed by courtly love. However, notice again the situation that Malory has set up. Thomas, on the one hand, what she wants as far as her marriage is concerned is irrelevant, but legally speaking, but we happen to know what she wants, right? She loves Tristram. Her dad is saying, I really wish you would marry my daughter. The daughter is like, yeah, he's the one I want, right? And Tristram, instead of being like, well, oh, twist, okay, fine. He's like, no, I insist that Isolde goes and marries my nasty uncle who's trying to get me killed. Yeah, both David Urbach and Carita are both kind of upset about the fact that he considers breaking this promise and marrying Isolde himself shameful, whereas like the sleeping with somebody else's wife was totally fine, right? David, see, that's the situation that Malory creates. So David Urbach says, can't Anguishans just deny his daughter's hand to Mark and hold out for his preferred suitor to come around? Yeah. Oh, totally. He absolutely has the right to say, heck no, I'm not marrying my daughter to that scumbag King Mark. He could totally say that, especially since he's the King of Ireland, right? So, I mean, yeah, like, for him to deny the request from King Mark would have political consequences, right? But Ireland already conquered Cornwall before. Presumably he'd be fine mixing it up again, right? So he's absolutely in a political position and in a legal position just to be like, nope, not giving my daughter to that jerk, right? Could totally do that. But remember the situation that Tristram himself created, right? I will save your life if you give me what I request. And the gift, the boon, the reward that he chooses, give me your daughter to marry to King Mark. So Anguishans can't say no without rejecting Tristram, with the reward for saving his own life. Again, notice how Malory has heaped thing upon thing to show this is Tristram's fault, right? Again, that phrase, that is in your choice. It is in his choice, right? He is completely trapped now, but it is a trap of almost entirely his own contrivance. Even the original promise that he made to Mark to bring back La Belle Isolde, he could get out of that on the principle that Mark only did it in order to get him killed, right? His faithfulness to this promise, which was sworn in bad faith on Mark's part, right? But Tristram insists the tragedy is on, right? It is his fault. Carita's saying that we seem to be learning that he just isn't that into her. Well, Carita, remember I said that before, that I think that it seems like she's more into him than he's into her. That's kind of what I'm getting from this too, honestly. That, he likes her and everything, but I'm not sure he likes her in that way. I mean, they looked like an item originally back when we were fighting Sir Palamedes over there in Ireland, but yeah, it's... Anyway, it's odd. It's odd. But it's all his fault. Again, it's all his fault is the kind of take-home message here. All right. And now for another random Tristram and Isolde story element. So, to mock short conclusion. So, we're coming home from Ireland now with Isolde to deliver her to King Mark. To mock short conclusion, La Belle Isolde was mad. I keep adding the L because Isolde, of course, is the normal, like the French way. Malory leaves off the L, so I'm trying to be faithful to Malory's spelling, but I misread it almost every time. La Belle Isolde, especially because there's an L in the previous word. It's like twice as hard. Sorry. So, to mock short conclusion, La Belle Isolde was... Actually, that would be a good synopsis of the entire Sir Tristram and La Belle Isolde story, right? To mock short conclusion. Anyway, sorry. All right, I'll come in again. So, to mock short conclusion, La Belle Isolde was mad ready to go with Sir Tristram. And Dame Brangwine, that's her lady-in-waiting, remember, went with her for her chief gentlewoman with many other. That the... Right. Then the queen, Isolde's mother, gaf Dame Brangwine unto her to be her gentlewoman. And also she and Gouvernail, that is Brangwine and Gouvernail, had a drink of the queen, and she charged them that where King Mark should wed, that some day they should give them, that is Mark and Isolde, should give them that drink, that King Mark should drink to La Belle Isolde. And then, said the queen, either shall love other days of their life. So this is a love drink. We have a love potion, which is a gift. That's the wedding gift from the mother-in-law, right? Here's this wedding potion that if the two of them drink together. Now notice this, this is a very kind of, a very sort of thoughtful medieval marriage present. Again, love and marriage, they don't really go together like a horse and carriage in the Middle Ages. It's just not the way, right? You don't love your wife. Your wife is very unlikely to love you. Again, it's just like it's set up by your parents, like you're told, like this is the, you're supposed to marry this person. There is no reason to think. So this is, if anything, it's kind of a kind gift to her daughter. I'm sending my daughter to marry King Mark, right? Do either of them love each other? I mean, like, probably not, right? It's probably not going to be a real love situation, likely to be an unhappy marriage. So, Queen of Ireland, she's got some, I don't know, studied some nigromancy. She minored in nigromancy or something. So she's got some skills. Remember, there was poison involved, which I think was her before. And she was getting ready to cook up something else to kill Sir Tristram before, back with the whole, piece of sword, the sword out of the brain pan thing. So anyway, exactly, Zachary. She majored in forensic science and minored in nigromancy, clearly. So she whips up a love drink. And so again, you can see how this is kind, right? If they drink this love drink, then they will love each other. So they don't come into this, nobody's under any illusions here, right? This is not a fairy tale romance for King Mark and La Belle Isolde. But if they drink this love drink, they'll fall in love with each other inescapably and will love each other for days of their life. And they'll live happily ever after, right? So, okay, thanks, Mom. That's nice. So this drink was given unto Dame Brangwine and unto Gouvernail. So Sir Tristram took the sea, and La Belle Isolde. Not in the same sense, presumably. Anyway, okay. And when they were in their cabin, in the boat, right, sailing over from Ireland, it happened so they were thirsty. And thon they saw a little flacket of gold stand by them, and it seemed by the colour and the taste that it was noble wine. So Sir Tristram took the flacket in his hand and sighed, Madame Isolde, here is a draught of gold wine that Dame Brangwine, your maiden, and Gouvernail, my servant, hath kept for himself. Then they lauch and made good cheer, and either drank to other freely. And they thought never drink that ever they drank so sweet, nother so good to them. Oh, this was the best wine ever, right? But by that drink was in their bodies, they loved either other so well that never here love departed, for weal neither for woe. And thus it happened first, the love betwixt Sir Tristram and La Belle Isolde, the which love never departed, dies of their life. So you'll notice that this doesn't, as you can tell, in most of the sources, this is where the story begins, right? I mean, we often get the truage thing and the whole David and Goliath thing and all that and stuff, and the, you know, the forensics and the bath and all that kind of thing. But that's just a danger thing. And he's, you know, he meets her, but they don't fall in love. They don't fall in love. He comes to fetch her for King Mark, and it's just like, this is just a marriage alliance, right, between Cornwall. And he's the messenger, right? Without malice, right? It's not trying to get Tristram killed. He's just sent over as messenger. And so here he is, minding his own business, right? Faithfully going about his uncle's business. And he presumably has noticed that she's cute, but she's his uncle's wife-to-be, right? So he's just doing the right thing until tragically they drink the love drink, and then they fall desperately in love. And now we are prepared for tragedy, right? As Tristram and Isolde desperately love each other, but he is in the midst of conveying her back to his king and uncle, kin and, you know, legal devotion, both. This is the setup for the tragedy of Tristram and Isolde most of the time, right? One thing that I just have to mention briefly, one of the French versions, I think it's the Bérulle version of the story of Tristan and Isolde, which there's one version of the story, which is the weirdest version, which has randomly the love potion wears off. Just like out of nowhere. So you're like 3/4 of the way through the story, and they've had all of these tragical things, and they've been trapped and caught, and he's been got, and then he escaped and he killed people, and then she's going to be killed, and he rescues her, and they run off into the woods, and they're being hunted, but they're living together happily, and you know, living this tragic life on the run while his king and her husband chases after them and everything, and they're living in the woods, and it wears off. And they're just like, oh, hey, whoa, why are we like living in the woods together? That's like totally inappropriate, right? We should totally go back to the court because you're married to my uncle. Holy cow, right? It's it's super weird. Made even weirder by the fact that Bérulle points out that, of course, Sir Tristram is a great hunter. So they have lots of venison, right? But they're living entirely on venison, so they actually start getting scurvy. I'm not even making this up. It's part of the story. They're like, we have a dangerously imbalanced diet, and they're getting all sickly and stuff. And then the drink wears off, and they're like, "Oh, we're out of here. This living in the woods together thing is for the birds." Oh man, oh, that's just one of the funniest moments in medieval poetry. But anyhow, okay, so of all of the surprising things that have happened in the story of Sir Tristram so far, this is to me the most surprising. That is the fact that he keeps the love drink. But I think it's important that he does so. And this, so by the way, like, notice how little sense that sentence makes. And thus it happened first, the love betwixt Sir Tristram and La Belle Isolde. No, it isn't. She's been into him for a long time, right? I mean, and it did not happen first here, right? But Malory insists that it does, right? So, okay, so why? So what's the point? Notice that in the tragedy, Malory goes out of his way. He doesn't need the love drink. The love drink is a crucial mechanism in most of the stories. It's what sets up the entire tragedy. He doesn't need it, right? They've already met. They've already become fond of each other, especially her, right? It's super easy, right? We're ready for the tragedy already. Besides the whole, like, I'm just doing this to get you killed in the first place. So there's lots and lots of reasons why the tragedy could perceive it. Malory does not need the machine of the love drink in order to precipitate the tragedy, right? In fact, the fact that he gives it not only provides no benefit to the story in that way, but is actually a detriment to the story in some ways, because it's contradictory to other things that have happened. And yet he does it. Yet he does not leave out the love drink. Why not? Right? Why doesn't he do this? Well, again, we don't really know why, but again, this fits into the pattern, right? Notice this element is there in the original. This element of accidental and inescapable. So again, their love is not by their choice. That's part of the essential story of Tristram and Isolde. Is not just that they are lovers who deviate from society because they choose their love, right? No, it's about compulsion, right? They can't help it. And so in some ways, right, in the original stories, this kind of lets them off the hook. Sir Tristram, it's a bad look. I mean, even if you accept courtly love and you're like, okay, having sex with married women is fine. Even if you're okay with that, having sex with your uncle's wife, less fine, right? Sleeping with your queen, really not fine, right? I mean, it's not fine in a lot of ways, right? This is a deeply sketchy love triangle from Tristram's perspective, right? But he can't help it, right? He didn't choose. Malory keeps that element in, having just insisted that this is all Tristram's fault to begin with, right? He then puts in the love drink, suggesting that there is something inescapable. Malory is literally having it both ways, right? On the one hand, Tristram's choices lead directly to the tragedy. Afterwards, after the choices that lead to the tragedy have been made, he then is placed in the grip of this magical spell, which compels him to love La Belle Isolde, so that he no longer has any choice, right? He made the choices, but he's locked into those choices. So Malory wants both of these things to be true. One of the conclusions that I would come to, therefore, from this is that both of those elements of the tragic, and in as much as what we're looking at are the blueprints of love tragedy here, those blueprints include both of these elements. Both the concept that your choices matter, right? And this happened because you made the boneheaded decisions that led to this, right? But love is inescapable. There is an inescapable angle of it. There is a compulsion. You choose, but you don't necessarily choose. Tarlonio, it's not only like free will versus predestination, it is also almost like the reconciliation of free will and predestination from Boethius, right? Both of those things are true. Tristram and Isolde are destined to love each other. They can't help it. It's their fate. And this accident aboard ship makes it happen. And yet they choose, repeatedly choose, and definitively, emphatically choose. Keep this in mind when we get to Lancelot and Guinevere. Lancelot and Guinevere aren't going to drink a love potion. But we have these two elements, both of which I think are important. And David, yeah, had he made better choices, no magic potion would have compelled him to make a bad one. Exactly. Well, and David, of course, remember the specific bad choices he made, right? Had he just gone along with her father's wishes and married Isolde himself, the love potion would have been fine, right? No tragedy involved, right? He was only in the situation where the love potion made it tragic because of the choices he had already made, right? Okay, we should stop soon. Let's see, how many Palmides slides do I have here? Oh, I've got like 3 or 4. Okay, we'll stop. It won't take too long with that. But anyway, so I hope that you can begin to see some of the patterns that I'm pointing to here. And it's only going to make complete sense when we get to the tragedy of Lancelot and Guinevere. And that's not far off. As I said, the end of today's reading is the end of most of the Tristram and Isolde action. So we're mostly done with their tragical love story. There's still more, but we're mostly done with the heart of it. And we're going to start digressing. As you see, of course, the next section is called, Sir Lamorak de Gallis. So we're going to go off and follow Sir Lamorak for a while. This begins the digressive elements of this central book of Sir Tristram de Lyonesse, which is not mostly about Sir Tristram. And as we go about these ramblings for the rest of this book, in which Tristram will occasionally feature, Lancelot is also going to feature. The tragical conclusion of Guinevere and Lancelot's relationship is not going to happen until the end. But a lot of the setup for that, Lancelot's virtue, Lancelot's values that we were looking at are going to come to a crisis here in the book of Sir Tristram. So this is not just setting up something distant in the book. It's setting up something immediate in the book. So there will be some relatively rapid payoff of these elements that we're exploring in Tristram and Isolde. Okay, we're running significantly behind here. Let's continue with the reading and see how we do. After next time, I might declare a hiatus and we'll do a catch-up day to sort of squeeze an extra catch-up class in between the next reading and the one after that. But let's continue with the reading, the posted reading for next week, and we'll see how far we get. And then I'll probably squeeze an extra week in. But for now, continue with the reading. All right? Thanks, everybody, for joining me, and I look forward to more talk next week. Don't forget, last moments to order the Chaucer class and the discounted Chaucer class, and Magnolia Moot, week and a half to register. Charlotte, North Carolina Moot happening on the 10th of November. So thanks very much, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye now.
The Mythgard Academy has been offering in-depth discussions of awesome books and films since 2013, completely free to attend and free to download. If you've enjoyed our discussions and would like to help them continue, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.